Marge Gunderson isn't just another cop in cinema history, she's one of the most unforgettable. A chipper, pregnant sheriff who radiates warmth and decency, she becomes the moral anchor in the Coen brothers' bleak, snowbound nightmare in a world of greed, violence, and absurd cruelty. Margie embodies something rare, honest goodness. But to understand why her heroism hits so hard, we first need to step into the culture she represents. Minnesota, land of Minnesota nice. So, let's take a look. Also, feel free to like, share, and hit the bell. On the surface, Minnesota nice looks wholesome, with a politeness and kindness, a mild-mannered approach to life, and confrontation is avoided at all costs. Even in tense moments, harmony is preserved with a smile or a gentle word. Yet beneath that smile lies a paradox. What outsiders mistake for pure friendliness can morph into passive aggression. Niceness becomes a mask, a way to hide frustration, selfishness, or resentment without breaking the social contract of civility. A cutting remark might be delivered with a cheerful tone. Resentment might be buried under exaggerated politeness, and in the punishing winters of the Midwest, survival often depends on mutual aid. The best way to secure that aid, staying unfoundly pleasant, even when your true feelings are far less charitable. The Coen brothers weaponize this cultural tension. They show how the demand to always be pleasant, always be agreeable, can create a dangerous blind spot. Civility becomes a shield for cruelty. As long as the behavior is wrapped in politeness, even reprehensible acts can slip by unnoticed. Step outside the performance of niceness, and suspicion immediately follows. Those most invested in appearing upright often repress their dark impulses, mistaking repression for virtue. But repression doesn't erase violence, it accumulates it. The Coens suggest that people most determined to maintain the image of decency are often the ones capable of shocking brutality, precisely because they've been taught to bury their darkness instead of confronting it. With Chief of Police Marge Gunderson, it's clear she embodies Minnesota culture to a T, but in the best way possible. Unlike those who use Minnesota nice as a mask, Marge's warmth and politeness are all genuine, rooted in values she likely absorbed from childhood. We can imagine her growing up in a modest household, surrounded by simple routines and simple virtues. Her parents probably taught her that kindness was not a strategy, but a principle. Being cheerful and considerate wasn't about hiding darker impulses, but about doing what is right. This upbringing seems less about rigid conformity and more about openness. Her parents may have encouraged her individuality, allowing her to deviate from the cultural expectations without fear of rejection. That distinction matters. Marge's niceness is not forced, not performative, but chosen. It's precisely this authenticity that sets her apart from the others in her community who feel compelled to maintain appearances. The film contrasts Marge's sincerity with figures like her former classmate, Mike Yanagita, whose strained attempts at politeness reveal the darker underside of repression. Mike embodies the way Minnesota nice can become hollow, a desperate performance that conceals loneliness and dishonesty. Marge, by contrast, demonstrates how the same cultural framework can nurture genuine goodness when it's lived sincerely rather than imposed. When Marge chose law enforcement as her vocation, shaped by the principles of honesty, kindness, and responsibility, she channels those values into her role as a protector of the community. Her decision to serve as sheriff reflects not only her personal integrity, but also her belief that goodness must be active. That to preserve harmony, one must confront wrongdoing directly. Now, let's turn to Margie's life outside of work, her home, relationships, and the small rituals that keep her grounded. In the film, she is 6 months pregnant, living in a modest house with limited means. Her meals often come from buffets or fast food restaurants, places that are neither glamorous nor expensive. Yet Marge takes pride in what she eats, treating even the simplest of meals as a source of comfort. At the center of her personal life is Norm, and their marriage is quintessentially supportive. The relationship is built on mutual respect and quiet acts of care. In their first scene together, Norm insists on making her eggs before she leaves for work. despite her protest that she needs to get going. Later, he buys her Arby's and even sits with her to keep her company. These gestures may seem small, but they reveal a partnership where each person is attentive to the other's needs. Norm is her steady rock, the one person who ensures that her life is not consumed entirely by the darkness she confronts in her job. For Marge, these everyday moments, a shared meal, a word of encouragement, a partner's quiet persistence, are treasures. They are not grand or dramatic, but they sustain her chipper attitude and remind her of the goodness worth protecting. In a film filled with greed, violence, and despair, Marge's home life offers a counterpoint, a vision of ordinary happiness where love and respect creates resilience. With all this in mind, we can safely say that Marge Gunderson is polite, empathetic, and a well-mannered person. During the scene where she's investigating the homicide, she examines the dead bodies at the crime scene, and we see her cultural upbringing surface, but in a way that helps rather than hinders. Faced with brutal violence, she steadies herself with small quips and observations, even expressing empathy. For Marge, the tragedy is real, but she refuses to let grief overwhelm her judgment. Her instinct is to keep a clear head so she can do her job. This balance between compassion and a composure extends into her personal life. She consistently supports and encourages Norm's artistic pursuits, even when he doubts himself. Marge even celebrates his achievements that seem small, like the 3-cent stamp featuring his artwork. What seems trivial to him, in her eyes, is a meaningful accomplishment worth honoring. Marge's ability to find joy in small victories reflects her broader worldview. Goodness is measured not by scale, but by sincerity. Her patience is equally evident in her professional interactions as well. When interviewing the young women connected to the kidnappers, their rambling stories offer little useful information, yet Marge listens attentively, thanks them for their time, and treats them with respect. This willingness to hear people out, even when they have little to offer, underscores her empathy and her refusal to dismiss others. We see the same qualities in her encounter with her old classmate, Mike Ganagita. When he tries to sit uncomfortably close, Marge politely asks him to move, framing it as preference for facing him directly. She responds with kindness, assuring him she doesn't judge him harshly. Her instinct is always to see the best in people, to interpret their actions as charitable rather than cynical. Marge's approach to interrogation often gives the impression that she isn't interrogating at all, but simply asking friends for help. This is deliberate. By maintaining an atmosphere of trust and friendliness, she encourages people to open up without feeling pressured. It's another example of how her cultural background, the instinct to be polite and approachable, becomes a strength in her role as a sheriff. One of the few backstories confirmed by Frances McDermott and John Carroll Lynch is that Marge and Norm originally met as fellow officers. When one of them had to leave the force, Norm chose to step aside, believing Marge was the better cop, while she continued in law enforcement. This detail underscores an important truth. Beneath her cheerful, almost too optimistic demeanor lies a deeply professional and highly skilled investigator. Her sharpness is evident in the way she reads crimes. She notices footprints and gunshot wounds, deducing that 2 killers were involved, one large and one smaller. When her colleague Lou mistakes DLR for license registration tag, Marge quickly corrects him, pointing out that it was more like a dealer plate. Given the circumstances of the shooting, these moments reveal her ability to cut through confusion and see the situation clearly, despite her soft-spoken tone that might mislead others to underestimating her. But Marge's skill is not limited to observation. It extends to how she handles people. We've already seen her patience with the young women connected to the kidnappers, but considering her conversation with Shep Proudfoot, a parolee with a criminal past, Shep is naturally defensive. Yet Marge never loses her composure. She leverages his situation subtly, pressing for information, while maintaining an air of innocence. Finally, her second conversation with Jerry Lundegaard demonstrates her ability to break down even the most stubborn of suspects. By maintaining her polite but firm demeanor, she pushes Jerry into a corner, a decision that exposes the weakness of his poorly planned crime. Here, Marge's combination of empathy, patience, and quiet authority proves decisive. However, there is evidence that Marge's upbringing within the culture of Minnesota Nice initially left her somewhat oversighted. Surrounded by people who seemed genuinely kind, she assumed that politeness was not a mask, for her niceness was not passive-aggressive or oppression, it was the authentic path to friendship, cooperation, and appreciation of life's smallest treasures. This belief shaped how she treated her husband, her co-workers, and her friends, and it even enhanced her effectiveness as a sheriff by valuing civility. She was able to build trust and cooperation, which helped solve cases. Yet Fargo reveals that this worldview is not always aligned with reality. The turning point comes in her encounter with her old classmate, Mike Yanagita. At first, Mike embodies the politeness Marge was raised to admire. He compliments her warmly, calling her a super lady, and shares a tragic story about his late wife, Linda Cooksley, who supposedly died of leukemia. He presents himself as a lonely, but familiar person she remembered from her childhood. But the truth, revealed by a mutual friend, shatters this image. Linda is alive, never married to Mike, and in fact had been stalked and harassed by him. Mike suffers from psychiatric problems and lives with his parents. What Marge mistook for genuine kindness was instead a performance, a desperate attempt to cling to appearances. Her only reaction is a simple, understated, "Geez, that's a surprise." This moment is pivotal as it forces Marge to confront the limits of her cultural assumptions. The encounter with Mike demonstrates that politeness can conceal disturbing realities and that not everyone who embodies Minnesota Nice is truly good. It is this realization that drives her to re-examine Jerry Lundegaard and press him harder about the crime. In other words, Mike's deception becomes the catalyst for Marge's deeper investigation, sharpening her instincts and reminding her that civility alone cannot be trusted as proof of character. Jerry Lundegaard is a man we must discuss, because he functions as Marge's inverse, the embodiment of everything she's not. On paper, Jerry appears privileged. He has a wife, a son, stable job at his father-in-law's dealership, and access to wealth through his family connections. Compared to Marge's modest home and simple lifestyle, his situation might seem amazing and secure, yet Jerry doesn't see it that way. Where Marge values the good things she has, Jerry resents his life, viewing it as inadequate and degrading. Marge never pursues money for its own sake. She approaches her work with professionalism, carrying the weight of responsibility without complaint. Jerry, by contrast, is incompetent and dishonest. He engages in fraudulent schemes at the dealership, inventing phantom car deals that only deepen his debts. He fails even at basic salesmanship, unable to sell a customer a coat. It's clear that his position was secured not by merit, but by his father-in-law's influence. And Jerry despises the work he has been given. Despite his family's financial security, as his father-in-law assures him that his wife and son will never have to worry about money, Jerry insists on chasing more for himself. His wife seems content where she is, but Jerry is consumed by greed and dissatisfaction. This obsession drives him to conduct a ludicrous plan, hiring criminals to kidnap his wife, so that his father-in-law will pay the ransom, which Jerry intends to split with the kidnappers. The scheme is so reckless that even the criminals questioned its logic. Here lies the contrast. Both Jerry and Marge outwardly embody Minnesota Nice. But while Marge's politeness is genuine, Jerry's is a disguise, a weak man's attempt to mask his incompetence and desperation. His cheerful veneer conceals selfishness, deceit, and cowardness. When Marge first meets Jerry, he appears harmless, even bumbling, a naive salesman who could not possibly be tied to a homicide. But her encounter with my Yanagita has taught her a vital lesson. With this realization, she begins to see through Jerry's facade. The signs point towards his involvement, and Marge decides to press him again. Her second meeting with Jerry almost seems like another pleasant conversation. She doesn't appear suspicious, but the evidence begins to converge. The dealer plates, the phone, and the call traces to the dealership. There are just too many coincidences to ignore. When she asks Jerry if he has recently done an inventory, he dodges the question, insisting that as the executive sales manager, he would just know. Marge presses this further by asking about the process of counting cars, which makes Jerry raise his voice, claiming he already answered the question. When she requests to speak to his boss, Jerry is cornered. There is no excuse left to invent, no way to talk himself out. His only option is to run, which only exposes himself. Meanwhile, Marge tracks down the car from the dealership and uncovers the kidnappers. By the time she arrives, Carl is dead, Jean, Jerry's wife, is already murdered, but even in the face of this carnage, Marge remains calm. She asks Gear to come quietly, but he runs. She pursues, shoots him in the leg, and takes him into custody. It is in the patrol car, driving Gear to jail, that Marge delivers her most powerful reflection. She tells him plainly, and for what? For a little money? There's more to life than a little money, you know. The simplicity of the phrase is striking, something a child could understand, yet the entire film has been driven by adults who ignore this truth, committing kidnapping, fraud, and murder in pursuit of wealth. Marge's words cut to the heart of the Coen brothers' vision. In a world where greed conquers morality, she stands as the counterpoint. A woman who never sacrifices her values for money, who treasures the small joys of her life, and who confronts evil without losing her decency. Her final line, "I just don't understand it," is not naivete, but moral clarity. She cannot comprehend the choice to destroy lives for profit because she has chosen a different path: gratitude, kindness, and integrity. And that was Marge Gunderson, the chief of police. A polite, well-mannered citizen who embodies the culture of Minnesota nice, but her politeness isn't just a social expectation or a protective shield. It is a genuine strength that shapes her life. It allows her to be empathetic, kind, and optimistic, while also focusing on the good around her at the same time. She pairs this warmth with intelligence and hard work, which firmly support her position. In the end, Marge's attitude doesn't just make her pleasant to be around, it highlights the guilt and incompetence of those she confronts, not only in their actions but in their worldview. That very incompetence is what exposes the crime, and it's Marge's steady kindness and competence that makes her the hero. Thanks for watching.